So I thought I would quickly go over the Arnold render view. The guys over at Arnold have developed a separate render view from the Maya render view, which is just a lot better. It's tailored to Arnold, it updates a lot faster, it's smoother to work with, it provides extra functionality, and there really is no reason to be using the Maya render view anymore. So, the Arnold render view, what does it contain? First of all, we can create snapshots over here, so just creating snapshots. Then you can add some comments, etc, etc. It's pretty basic stuff. Over here we have the list of AOVs, which we already discussed. Then over here we have the render camera, so which camera are we rendering from. And over here we have isolate selected. This feature is just like a godsend for shading, guys. So let me try and illustrate this. Let's create a little bit of a shading network. You can, by the way, also select objects in the Arnold render view, which is pretty useful. Okay, so here we go. Let's say, for example, that we have a fractal, so AL fractal, driving some color values. AL layer color. So let's select two silly colors. This is going to be truly horrible, but hey ho. Set the alpha to 1 of the first layer and pipe in the fractal into the alpha of the second layer. So the red color channel into the second alpha layer, the alpha of the second layer. And let's pipe this into the color. So without the isolate selected, it would kind of look like this. Which is fine, but sometimes you want to be looking at a fractal by itself too. For example, if you do things as remapping the roughness, which is not as apparent as remapping the color, for example, you can just create or select this node and then isolate selected, and it will just render this object with this node, which is just incredibly useful in so many shading scenarios. So then the next case is you have multiple layers contributing to a final color map, and there's many alphas going into this, etc. So sometimes, even though you're modifying the fractal, you still want to have a look at the final result. So if you want, you can lock this node, or you can lock the isolate selected to this node, and then you can still change it up. And this is pretty useful to know. There we go. So next up, over here, you've got the RGB and alpha channel, and then you have also the luminance summation. That's pretty useful for lighting stuff. Over here you've got the alpha, it's just a shortcut. Just 1:1 pixels, so this is full size. Over here you have the crop region, which you can select with shift, or just shift and drag. And then over here you've got some exposure sliders, but personally I don't use this very often. Then there's a couple more things. Let's go through the menus. First of all, we see the file menu, and over here you can decide to save out an image or a multi-layer EXR. Over here it's just a flat EXR, PNG, JPEG, whatever. Over here it's multi-layer, so with all the AOVs. Then in the window, I personally like to display the pixel information over here. Now often, for example, let's say we're debugging this fractal to pipe into the roughness, and we're dealing with exact values. So for example, I want to remap it from 0.2 to 0.6. Then you can look over here in the corner and see what these values are actually like. Let's make this a little bit bigger. You see the RGBA values, the lightness values, etc, etc. It's very handy. Okay, so then next, what do we have over here? These are just display options. Over here in the toolbar icons, we can add the debug shading icon. There we go. This adds an extra drop down for us. So over here you can select some different shading modes. For example, the basic shading nodes, which is a normal with the dot product of the camera vector. And this allows for incredibly fast shading, but you can still debug your displacements, etc., etc. Your lighting, ambient occlusion, wireframes, etc., etc. Yes, that's all there is to this. The other ones are not so important in my opinion. Go the same options as we saw over here. Then the test resolution, this is pretty useful I think. You can just select the test resolution. So you can do overnight renders on 100% and work on 25% or something like that. And then in the render there is the update full scene. Usually you want to update the full scene after you do geometry changes, for example. So let's say you adjust the height of a displacement map or the tiling of displacement map or something like that. Then you want to do an update of the full scene to make sure Arnold updates everything. It will really restart the render in this case. Then over here we can save the UI threads. I often like to set this to 3 just to have a smoother shading experience. And over here the debug shading once again. So that really is all there is to it. The isolate select is an incredible feature, especially in combination with the lock isolate selection. So yes, now we know this, we can use the Arnold render view to create some assets.